Hello and welcome again to another episode of One Starfish, where our mission is to help change the world one starfish or one person at a time. As always, make sure to rate, review, subscribe, share. This is how we get the word out about what we do. Our guest today, I'm excited. I just met her. She was referred to me by a good friend of ours, Andy. Christy is in Colorado area. She runs a website design company called Cooper and Hart. She just branched into it about 6 years ago, so we're going to definitely get into that and doing it with kids and all the things, but has been in like IT and that world for like 25 years. So has lots of experience in general. So welcome to the show, Christy.
Thanks so much for having me, Angela.
All right, let's get into things because I'm excited.
Yeah.
So we're chatting before. First of all, Christy's energy is contagious. I love her energy. You'll love her energy. If you're watching this, you can feel it through like the YouTube, I'm sure. But so what caused you to want to start your business 6 years ago from working in, I guess, a corporate job? We didn't even get into that. And then you had a newborn, and then you had like a toddler, and you quit your job, and you were the breadwinner. And like, tell us a little bit about that and what the mindset was.
Yeah. So I worked at a design agency. I would call them they were a small design agency, but they were very reputable in the city that where I was living. And I worked there for nearly 12 years before I quit, but I was so burnt out of the work I was doing. I was uninspired. I did not enjoy what I was doing anymore. It had been the job I got after I got my degree, and I had my first kid, and I started thinking about getting a different job. And then I was like, well, I'll start freelancing on the side. A couple years later, I have my second kid, and we had my first kid in childcare, and we were like, we can't afford two kids in childcare with our income level at that time. And my job was the breadwinner job. My husband's job didn't pay as much. And so I was like, well, I've been working on this business for 2 years. See what happens if I go full time. And it was a leap of faith because we had no savings. And
So
I
by
had
the way,
one.
not recommended, guys.
Yeah, not recommended. It's really not recommended. We had no savings. We use credit, and I had one client, so it was kind of a little bit of a hustle. I had a newborn and a 3-year-old, and my husband's hours and overlapped my work hours. Anyway, it was a little bit of a chaotic time. But that first year, I made more than my salary in
Wow.
revenue that first full-time year. So it worked out. Like I made it work, and now I've been doing it ever since.
Okay, so it make it sound almost easy. If you're like, "Ooh, that sounds awesome. Let's do that." So you were building your business for 2 years, which that makes sense. That's awesome. You're already building some traction. How much, if you don't mind me asking, like how much had you made percentage wise or exact, I don't care, whatever, in those first 2 years? What did you brought in yearly to make you go, well, you know what, we can do this full time?
I really don't know what made me think that, because I made like on the side hustle, like the first year I made like $10,000, and I
Pretty
basically
good side hustle, actually. That's pretty good.
and the second year I made $15,000,
Oh, we're going up in leaps and bounds.
and I had like that one retainer client that I had. And so I guess I don't know. I don't know. I felt like I can do this, and inspired at the time. I really don't know. Maybe with my pregnancy.
Self-confidence. There you go. Hormones were running through my blood. I have no
My
idea.
hormones, they were like, you gotta make
And you
this.
had a newborn, which, for any mothers listening, I don't have kids, but I've been around some and a lot, and they keep you up all night, I believe. And so you're really tired too.
Yeah, really tired. Yeah, I tell people I don't remember a whole lot about that first year, because I think I was just running on what little I had. Luckily, my baby started sleeping pretty well around 6 months, but um, yeah, it was interesting.
So building that business, what did you do? Were you knocking on doors? Were you cold calling? How did you start to build your clientele?
Yeah, so back then I was doing a lot of so I was doing everything virtually, because in the city I was in, I didn't want any conflict with the agency I was working at in local networking. And so I was doing virtual networking, essentially on Facebook for the most part. So I would get into Facebook groups where I would get into like memberships or things like that. And I would connect with people and people would start to say, oh, hey, she does graphic design. Because at the time, like, especially in the early days, I did whatever, like I did anything and
Yeah,
everything.
sure. Whatever pays the bills. We're good.
Like, yeah, sure, I'll do that graphic for you. And so I just started commenting and connecting with people. And so it started to build a little bit of reputation of like, oh, she's a designer, she can help you. So that's kind of how it went off. And then I did bring one client with me from the agency that was like basically I was the only one who worked with them, and so they were happy to continue working with me in a different
Right.
business. So.
Okay, that's good. And so then what were some of the obstacles? I mean, how did you navigate some of the obstacles as you built that first year? And also, well, let's just go with that. And then I have another question following that. But, what were some of the obstacles? Obviously, you had a baby, you had a toddler, um, and you're doing it. How did you navigate all of that? Do you remember?
Yeah, I'm like, do I remember? I don't know. I think I had some small groups that were kind of like peer mastermind kind of groups. I had some support. So
Okay.
I think that was key, is like having other people going through similar things to talk to and like say, I'm struggling with this, and like kind of keep the faith that I could keep going. Um, yeah, I think
Did you
that like
find those groups before you came full time, or did you find them after?
I know I had some before. Actually, oh yes, I remember I joined a program and they divided us up into these little pods of like three people. And I actually met my biz bestie, is like a funny term, but like she's still my business best friend right now, like 6 years
Awesome.
later. So I met her right at that time, and we had calls every 2 weeks, and we still have calls every 2 weeks. And we just talk about business. And so I think having support really helped me get through the struggles of like,
Mm.
no one's buying, how am I going to find a new client? Like, I think the typical struggles were there. Like, am I going to make any money this month? Like, all of that was just there. So luckily I had a good credit, and we had credit cards and stuff. And so that kind of tied us over. And then my husband's job paid like the mortgage, you know, and the utility bills. And so I just had to make sure we had enough to eat and uh and things like
So for
that. So
anyone listening to this, I mean, first of all, that's really important. Like associations are everything, and you figured that out really fast, which is impressive. Um, and then you went on to credit, which some people, I just find a lot of people are like, oh, if I'm making a credit, it's not meant to be. So I'm just curious on a dollar sense, how much did you run yourself into debt? Because I'm guessing you were debt free when you started, basically. And how much did you run yourself into debt till you started to come out on the black side? Do you remember?
hmm. I don't think it was too bad. Yeah, I don't remember it being significant, and like I didn't max out my cards. Um, I think on the personal side, I was probably up around 8,000 in like debt on the credit cards, which didn't max out the limits. So, and then on the business side, I don't remember. I
So
luckily
did
don't
you
have
hit
a lot of
30,000?
expenses in my work. Like, um,
About 30,000, you said?
I don't think it was, no, I think it was more like 8,000 on personal
I mean,
credit card.
it's not really
And
matter
then I
exact,
know
but
I have
I just know a lot of people like
maybe 5,000 on business card.
okay, yeah. So about 13,000 combined.
Yeah.
It's not bad.
Yeah. Yeah. And then I just started, like, as things started to shift, I'd started to pay it off. So luckily at the time, like our expenses weren't a whole lot. And I'm not counting like the medical bills I had from having the baby, and like those were a whole nother, because she was in the NICU for a while. So those bills were high. So I'm not counting my medical debt in that.
Okay.
Um, yeah, then things started to turn around, and then I just started to pay off the credit cards because I really have a strong aversion to having credit card debt. Like, it's like it makes me feel bad if I feel bad. And then a lot of that has to do with how like my parents handled their debt and stuff like that. Um, but like other debt or like smarter debt, like especially in business, I'm much more like, oh yeah, like I have 0% for a year, like let's keep the cash flow going. That kind of stuff is more
That's cool.
reassuring.
Yeah, that makes sense. And as I said, just a lot of people really avoid it. And they're like, oh my gosh, I'm going into debt. I know that. And then I'm like, but you go into debt a lot of times to go to school. So, there's
Yeah.
that. And people don't like view it the same way. They're like, oh, that's okay. But to start a business and go into debt, oh my gosh, something's wrong.
Yeah,
Like,
and it's very typical, and like especially if you contrast it with like a brick and mortar kind of business. So like my friend, her sister started a franchise, like, and that's a in place business. Like she had to invest in the franchise fees plus the location and all of the physical things that go
thousands,
into it.
thousands.
It's like, and that's how you start, is you start with that much debt to pay off over time, building your business to be successful. So it's very interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting when people are like afraid to invest. And like, I wouldn't say just continue to use up your debt indefinitely. Like I did give myself a timeline. I think I gave myself like 6 months to see progress in my business income, or I had to find a job. Like it was
Like
like
that.
I give myself some time. I either make this work and like see some progress in getting clients and things like that, or I'm gonna have to find a job because my family is relying on me. So
I like that. But one of the things that I get from you is you believe that you could win. I could tell this right away. You're just like, I
yeah.
just do. So where did that self-belief come from? Because I believe that a lot of people they lack in that. And I'm going to say females in general because we're females, but males also do. But where did that self-belief come from in yourself? And how can
Yeah.
someone develop it, you think, if they don't?
Yeah. So I don't always have it.
Okay.
I definitely go back and forth, and different levels of like, oh my gosh, what am I doing? Maybe I should quit this, go find a job. Um, yeah, I think part of it is personality, or I've always had like an achievement oriented personality. I don't know if it was how I was raised, or but I was like the A student or the best student in class. And so I think part of that carried over into business, sometimes to my detriment. But I think it was thinking about how in the past I did have some random coaching in there too that would kind of bring. I did some like one-off coaching calls. Like I didn't have a regular coach, but they would like bring things up, or I would be following people and they would bring things up. And so then it would just make me realize, like in the past when I've wanted something or I wanted to achieve something, I did eventually do it. And so I think that helped reinforce my self-belief that I could do this new thing going forward. And it still does. I still rely on that.
I love that. So obviously just using past wins to say that we can have future wins. But what if someone, I don't know, your thoughts on this. What if someone feels like they don't have a lot of past wins? Because I think a lot of people, like I do a lot of coaching in my business, and I just think a lot of people come in without self-belief. And I'm only trying to figure out how to like raise their self-belief because I feel I had it also strongly for various reasons. But some people don't. And I feel like, I mean, you have to have it to win. So what are some ways that people can raise their self-belief that you think, you said you don't have it all the time. What do you do to help build it on the days that you don't really feel it?
So I'm not very good at it, but I try to celebrate like the smaller wins, like the smaller
Mhm.
achievements, like because sometimes I think we get stuck on like, oh, I didn't hit that big goal of, whatever, this much money this month or whatever it is, right? I didn't hit that big goal, but instead like thinking about, oh yes, but I did stick with doing this and this and this to help build my network, or did my marketing right, or whatever it is. So I think for me, kind of celebrating those smaller achievements that really most people wouldn't say are like celebration worthy, but I think that helps. And I think also, like, if you really lack self-belief, coaching does help a lot because you can borrow their belief. So at the end of my first year, I still felt I was struggling so bad. Like, even though I had already achieved, some revenue, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know where my next client's going to come from. I think the end of that year was like, I'd gone 2 months without anything new. And so I was like, I'm gonna hire a coach. And when I hired a coach one-to-one after that, like I was able to borrow her belief in me. She was like,
Mm.
you can do this. So I borrowed her belief. I'm like, well, she believes I can do it, so I can believe I can do it. And so I think that also helps a lot if you're
And
lacking.
I want to comment on something that I don't know if the listeners listened to or caught. So you didn't get a client for a couple months. So you're actually like going downhill. And that's when you invested in a coach.
Yeah.
A lot of people would do the opposite and they would pull in. You went
Yeah.
out. And can you speak on that? Like what had you do that and what do people need to pay attention to? Because I think that's a common thing that a lot of people don't do. And that I believe is a huge differentiator between those who win and those who don't.
Yeah. Yeah. It's very interesting. I feel like so the particular coach I hired, she was having like an end of year planning type event, and I just kind of caught on to it at that time, and it hit me at the right moment at the right time. Um, and that was a big investment. Like, and that I totally went on a credit card, and it was very scary. Um, but I think because it felt right, like I follow my gut a lot of the times and things like that. Um, that's what helped me make that decision. It was like either I have to, I knew I couldn't keep going the way I was going because it was too inconsistent. It was too up and down. My family needed a little more reliable income than that. Um, and the credit card debt was stacking up. So it was like, it felt like a
Well, then you
point.
added to this credit card debt.
I
Like I
know.
said, I have so many people that are like, no way. Like I encourage them to go to events and I'm like, you need to go listen to the speaker. You need to get this coaching and they're like, oh, no, no, we're going to get added debt before we do that thing. And because they're very debt adverse also. And they're like, we're going to get added debt before we go into more debt. But you have to be willing to invest in yourself. I'm very, very strong on this. So,
Yeah.
and you did also like bringing in your hubby's in this situation too. How did he feel about all this? Is he just like, has he just always believed in you? Or was there points throughout this where he's like, I don't know, Christy, this might not be the best thing we're doing.
I
Um,
mean,
yeah.
yeah, he's always been supportive. So I've always been the kind of career oriented one of us. And he was always like, I just need a job to pay the bills kind of person. Because he's a musician, so he has music on the side. And so that's kind of more of his
Passion.
fulfillment.
Yeah.
And so, and he was, yeah, I think he was just like supporting my belief in myself. I mean, don't get me wrong, we had a lot of stressful times. I mean, we had two young kids and finances were up in the air and it's a little tricky. But yeah, he just yeah, he was very supportive overall.
Now, outside of your husband, did you have a lot of support or there's a lot of people that said, what are you doing? And if you had that, how did you deal with that negativity? Because a lot of people, that takes them out of the game too.
So, I mean, I think how I protected myself from that is I didn't discuss it a lot, like with my parents who have a very
Good idea.
money mindset. So I would just be like, this is what I'm doing, but I wouldn't get into details of like, oh, I'm racking up debt or oh, I'm making a big
By the
investment
way,
or
I just
anything like
spent
that.
all this money on a coach when I have no money.
Yes, yes. I didn't get into any of those details with them. They would just kind of ask how it was going, and I'd say, well, it's kind of hard right now, or it's great. I just booked a client, whatever it was. But I didn't get into especially money details because I knew that they wouldn't understand where I was with money, and that they would just have negative comments, or comments that wouldn't be helpful for me. And so I just kind of avoided discussing details like that with them.
I like that. So
So
your investment in yourself, if you could put a rate of return on that, specifically when you really didn't have it? I'm sure you invested lots more over the years since then, but right when things were really tough and you weren't making any money and you invested, a lot of money you set on a credit card. If you could put an ROI on that into the next year, I don't know if you could do that. What would you say it would be?
Um, I mean, it was significant. I mean, I hired her again. Um, and so I'll just do, it's easier if I just say numbers. So that first year I made $66,000.
Okay.
The second year I made $115,000. And so
Some good growth.
my income increased a lot, like my faith in myself. I shifted my business. It was also 2020, so everything was very interesting with the pandemic, and the online space and everything. But yeah, like I shifted my business. I had so many clients in 2020 that, yeah, I would say I don't know what.
How much was she, if you don't mind me asking? How much was it that initial investment in 2019 that would be? What was that initial investment when you made 60,000? What did you invest in yourself?
So I invested $10,000 for 6 months,
Okay.
which is a good chunk of what I
A lot.
made.
She made 60,000. We're raising a family. Guys, I want you to put this into thought process. And we invested 10,000 into a coach, not into food, not into anything for the family, a coach, which, I just think that's so cool. Like I said, I just think, especially mothers, if you're listening to this, a lot of times it's investing back into your kids and, your family. And we're so much about giving back and la-di-da-di-da. And that's awesome, but you have to invest in you. And then you went out and like almost tripled your income for various reasons, but it doesn't matter. I think that was a huge part, or you probably would have quit. So like, that's a huge, like, that's a big ROI. Like you put 110,000 in and then you make like 150, like that's pretty good ROI. Actually pretty good. So, and then that's more of give to the kids. So like, instead of looking at it like you're taking away from your family, you need to look at like you're investing yourself so you can give to your family, but then you need to go out and do the work to back it up. Cause I do see people that do this. They're like, I'll just go to all these events and I'll spend all this money. And then like they get home and they're just like, sit there. They're like, manifestation, it's going to happen. Like, no, you need to make some calls. You need to do some work, and apply the things. But that's really impressive. 10,000 is a lot of money when you made 60,000 while raising a family.
It was a big investment at the time, for sure. And like, like my stomach clenched when I made that like payment, but it worked out. It worked out. And I think what really pushed me forward was like, I really, really didn't want to go back to a job at that point. Like I'd already had that taste of freedom, and I could see what was possible. I just needed some help to move forward with it. And so I think it was really that I want something better for my life, for my family's life. And so I'm going to take this risk.
I love that. That's so cool. That's amazing. And where do you see things going? What's your next 5 to 10 year goal with your business? Where do we think things going now?
That's a good question. I'm not very good at like specifics, like 5, 10 years out. I'm usually like a year out, 2 years out. Okay. Hold on. I see me growing my business revenue into multiple 6 figures. So I've been very steady at like that low to high 100 to 200K mark, ever since 2020. But I see kind of raising that, and I'm intentionally spending more time like investing, building like a side nest egg in investments so that, retirement or if I get sick or things like that. So I think just raising my revenue up a little bit more so I have more to invest. So I'm not really looking to build a big agency. I had the agency world and I didn't love it. And so that's not my dream. Some people love it, but not me. So I see myself staying pretty small. Like I'm just going to stay pretty small, but I'd like to raise my revenue so that I can continue to invest and just enjoy life. Like I really value space, freedom with my time. I'm doing more volunteer work now. Like, it's just like, I don't know. Yeah, that's my goal.
That's cool. I love it. That's awesome. All right. Well, wrapping up, I always have three final questions, and then anything we didn't touch on that you think would be really impactful for our listeners. And guys, obviously, if you have any website questions, she also does branding in relationship with the website. We talked about that a little bit before. Reach out to her. We'll have all her information, all Christi's information will be in the show notes. So definitely reach out if you have some actual technical questions or need help or anything else like that, or just some conversations of how to build a business with a toddler and a baby, all that kind of good stuff. Anyway, first and final question is, if someone's looking for their purpose, what's one sentence you could say that could help them find it?
I would say listen to that little voice in the back of your head about the thing that you really actually enjoy doing. Because sometimes it gets buried under all the noise of all the other work you're doing. So if there's one thing that there's a little voice, it's like pulling you in that direction.
Awesome. Second question, what's a favorite quote and why?
My favorite quote, which is also an affirmation, is things are always working out for me, no matter what it looks like right now. And that's from Abraham Hicks. And I don't know, it just resonates with me, like keeps me going.
I like that. Third and final question. What's one word or sentence you want on your gravestone?
She was a good human.
That's cool. All right, you run into someone in the coffee shop, and they learned about investing in themselves. That's important. Self-belief, building your own self-belief, building your associations. We talked about a lot of that stuff. What's something we didn't touch on that you think would be really impactful for our listeners?
I think, and this relates to my expertise, that having some sort of website does matter. There's a lot of noise, or there's other people who say you don't need a website at all, but I think it helps more than it hinders most people. And it doesn't have to be complicated. It can be a simple one-page website to get you going. So I would say that could have an impact as well.
Cool. Get a website. Reach out to Christi if you need a website. I love it. Awesome, guys. Let's go out there. Let's change the world one starfish or one person at a time. If we can change one life at a time together, we can change the world. Thanks for being on, Christi.
Thank you.